Here we go. Proverbs 4:23. Keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flow the springs of life. Proverbs 4:23. When I read the book of Obadiah, one word comes to mind, and that is rivalry. Rivalry. All right? If you haven't read the book of Obadiah, I would encourage you to do it this week. But when you do, you will see there's one word that comes to mind, and that word is rivalry. All right? I'm going to read you dictionary.com's definition, and then I'm going to give you my definition for rivalry, okay? The correct definition is a person who tries to equal or outdo another, or to dispute another's preeminence or superiority. So that may be what I would consider the politically correct version. Here's the Travis version, okay? Someone, some team, or some group who you hope never wins another game or never does anything well for the rest of eternity until Jesus comes back. Right? I experience rivalry in that form, not the politically correct form, but that form, the redneck form, right? The less correct form, at a very early age. I've told y'all some of those stories about going to football games on Friday nights, and there was something special about rivalry week, right? It was huge. It was a little bit bigger than when I was younger and in high school than it is now, because there's more schools in Houston County than there is now. And so, but back then, it was huge, man. It was literally, the town was transformed, and pretty much everybody south of the dividing road wore red, and everybody who was cardinal, my dad would be like, right now. And everybody north wore blue and orange, like another school that some of you pull for. Anyway, maybe that's why I don't like that school either. Anyway, that's just a coincidence there, shockingly enough. But anyway, and so I was introduced to rivalry at a very early age, and it was huge. It was special. It was unique. But then there's the side of rivalry that's like, ugh, right? There's that side of rivalry that's like bad and vengeful and nasty, like sort of like when my mom and dad were in school. My mom went to Northside, and my dad went to Warner Robins. We converted her, thank the Lord. And so me and my sister both went to Warner Robins. But when my dad was in high school, he was a little bit older than my mom. Someone took a pig and they painted it red, and they greased it afterwards. I don't know how they got the paint to stay on the pig after they greased it, but they did. And then somebody from Warner Robins went over to Northside and let the thing loose in the school. So you can imagine how fun that was, right? My mom said it took them like periods to kind of like catch, class periods, to catch and finally get the pig out of the classroom. That may be just a little mischievous. But sometimes rivalry is taken to an extreme level. And I think the most applicable, and some of you will know this story better than others, to me, the most applicable story of rivalry in modern times occurred in Auburn, actually, Alabama, after Auburn won their last national championship with Cam Newton. And if you're not familiar with Harvey Updike, you should be, right? So I see some of you like, I have no idea who this guy is, right? Well, there's probably a reason. Well, Harvey Updike is a diehard Alabama fan. And if you're not familiar with the Alabama-Auburn rivalry, it's probably the greatest, most intense rivalry in the world. Not the nation, but that they hate each other for most, well, y'all don't hate them, but dislike them severely, right? Hate's a little strong, but severe dislike, right, Liz? Yeah. So anyway, Harvey Updike was really mad about an incident that happened way a long time ago. Mad Alabama lost to Auburn, and then Auburn goes on to win the national championship, which from Auburn's point of view for Alabama's point of view was not legitimate because of Cam Newton and all. It's just a lot of background. So anyway, he decides he's going to get revenge, right? And so he goes to his local feed and seed store and buys this really, really potent tree killer. I didn't even know they made this stuff. Not like Roundup, but like deforestation type killer. And there's these special oak trees in Auburn at Toomer's Corner, and he literally pours this stuff, and they're hundreds of years old. They've been there for ages. Yeah. Ever, right? And they're just like historic. They're like historic landmark. They die. I mean, they're like crushes them. They try to save them, but they can't. In fact, after the original ones die, they have to literally dig them up, and they dig down 8 feet worth of dirt to get all the polluted dirt out. And then one of the replants still died because there was so much toxin in the ground. They had to dig it up, dig dirt back up, and replant another one several years later. That is rivalry to the extreme. Anyway, Harvey Updike did jail. He's had to get jail time. He broke some federal laws and all this kind of stuff. And he's gotten out since then. But to me, that is the greatest example of modern times of rivalry taken to the back. Now, rivalry is good in some sense, but taken to the extreme, it turns into Harvey Updike. And today, our story of Obadiah really deals with rivalry. This goes back hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. See, our story is about a group of people, or Obadiah writes in response to a group of people called the Edomites. And they may not seem like a significant people, and really and truly, they weren't a very large kingdom in respect of the kingdoms that were around Israel, right? But Edom, the thing that's unique is Edom, the Edomites were the descendants of Esau. And Israel was the descendants of Jacob. And if you'll remember, all the way back in the book of Genesis, literally hundreds of years, maybe even thousands of years before Obadiah writes, you have Jacob and Esau. They're the two twin boys of Isaac and Rebekah. And if you'll remember the story, if you don't, you can go back and read it in Genesis. But here's what happens. Isaac and Rebekah have twins. Esau's the oldest. He comes out first. Then Jacob is grabbing his heel on the way out. That hence his name. Jacob means heel grabber. And so they take very different paths in life. Esau is an outdoorsman. He's a hunter. He's rugged. He's and Jacob is not. He likes to stay at home and do stuff inside the house or around the house. And so Jacob, in the end of the way the story goes, he uses that to his advantage. Because Esau comes in one day, and since he's the older, he gets the birthright. And in Jewish culture, if basically the first son got a double portion of all that the father had. So let's do the math real quick. If there's only 2 sons, and the first one gets a double portion, what does the second son get? Nothing. So Jacob's son figured this out. We got to do something about this, right? So Esau comes in one day, and he's been hunting, and he's been out in the field, and he's tired, and Jacob's like, aha, we're fixing to change this. And so Jacob offers him a bowl of lentil stew in exchange for his birthright. Now Esau, being ignorant, accepts it, which is really not smart, because it's one bowl of stew versus all the inheritance of his father. And so Jacob steals, or takes, the birthright from Esau. But then there's this other thing that Jacob does later in life. It's called the blessing. And so when Isaac is old and he can't see very well, Jacob and his mother devise a plan. And so you can really see that Jacob is mom's favorite. Should give us something as parents about having favorites in the house, right? It doesn't usually turn out well, especially in this story. It turned out terribly. Because Jacob disguises his skin, because Esau's really rough and he's got hairy and all this, and so he kills a lamb or a goat and puts the hair on his arms, and he goes to his father, and Isaac can't see anymore, and Jacob, in I guess an Esau type voice, disguises himself, and he smells like the outdoors like his brother does, and he says, "Father, bless me," and Isaac blesses Jacob. And right after that, Esau comes in. And Esau figures out what's happening. Both of them, they kind of figure out in the moment that Isaac has been tricked by Jacob. And Esau gets really angry. And he says, "But Father, can you please not bless me? Is there still not a blessing?" And Isaac says, "Son, no, not really." And his blessing on him is, you will basically serve your younger brother. And he will be over you. And Esau gets furious, as you might imagine. And Jacob runs away. And he stays gone for a really long time, many years. And finally in Genesis chapter 33, they meet back up. And in this moment, Jacob is really afraid. He literally thinks Esau might kill him. But he doesn't. They embrace each other, they hug, they kiss, they talk, they have a good time, and then they kind of go their separate ways in peace. But this rivalry, even though it somewhat ended well in that moment, it is not lost on the generations that follow. Because see, as time passed and as the children of Jacob, the children of Israel, went down to Egypt and stayed there a while, and they were coming back in the book of Numbers, now led by Moses, probably 1 million strong or hundreds of thousands large at this time. They have to go through Edom to get to the promised land. And the king of Edom says, no, y'all ain't coming through here. In fact, he goes so far to hire a pagan priest prophet to come and curse the Israelites. But God doesn't allow him to curse them. He allows him to bless him. Then later on, when Saul and Solomon and King David are around, all of the Edomites at times would come against Israel, and sometimes Israel would prevail, and at other times the Edomites would win freedom, and at some points the Israelites rebelled. And there was this ebb and flow, back and forth rivalry of who's going to be over the other. Right? In fact, shockingly enough, we still see this rivalry in the New Testament as well. In Matthew chapter 2, you might remember this story from the birth narrative of Jesus. In Matthew chapter 2, King Herod the Great is the ruler of Israel, and he finds out from the wise men that a king has been born in Israel. And what does he do in response? He tries to kill all the baby boys that are 2 years old and younger, right? And hence Jesus and Mary and Joseph, they flee to Egypt in safety, right? You say, how does this rivalry work? Herod was not a Jew. Herod was what's called an Idumean, which was simply a different way to translate the name Edom. And so here we have Herod, a descendant of Esau, still trying to kill the Jews and gain superiority. And so we have all of this rivalry back and forth, ebb and flow, and we insert all of that into the book of Obadiah. Because the book of Obadiah, if you read it at first glance, without the backstory, it's like, But when you put all of this backstory in, and you come to verse 11, you realize exactly what's going on. Read verse 11 with me. On the day, and I'll insert the names. On the day you, that's Edom. On the day Edom stood aloof, stood back, didn't care. On the day that strangers, that's the Babylonians, carried off his, that's Judah's, wealth. All right, so on the day you, Edom, stood aloof, on the day that the Babylonians carried off Judah's wealth, and foreigners, there's the Babylonians again, entered his gates and cast lots for Jerusalem. You, Edom, were just like one of them. So here's the picture. All right? You have all of this ebb and flow, back and forth, rivalry going on and on and on and on. Who's going to be superior? Is it going to be the older son or the younger son? Older son or the younger son, right? And the Babylonians come in, and they're literally conquering the world. And the moment when Edom realizes the Babylonians are about to conquer Israel, here's what they do. Hey, can we help y'all? Can we get some of that too? Man, we don't like those guys either. I know that they're our kin folks. We really don't like them. This is our one chance, and we're about to get them good. And so Edom inserts itself onto the Babylonian side, and they go in and they either help them capture Jerusalem, or as the Israelites are on the way out, they antagonize them and take them captive and stand against the Israelites so they don't prosper, or some combination of both. Regardless, Obadiah's point is, here's what we have against you. We are your relatives and your brothers, and yet you have willfully disobeyed the Lord, and you have willfully helped our enemies conquer us. And so the rest of Obadiah's book is about, here's what's going to happen to you guys now. And it's not a pretty picture. Look at it with me just really quickly. In verse number 6, Obadiah says Esau or Edom will be pillaged. Verse number 7 says that the people who you thought were friends will actually become your enemies. In verse number 8, Obadiah says the Lord will destroy the people of Edom. And in verse 18, he uses this agricultural illustration to show that they will burn like stubble in a fire and no one will survive. And so at first glance, you could, I'm not saying this is correct, but you could read Obadiah as sour grapes, right? We lost, you helped the bad guys, we're mad at you because you didn't help us, right? It's kind of like middle schoolish drama, you know what I mean? No, I'm sure none of y'all were ever in that drama in middle school, but maybe you saw it, right? It's like tit for tat. It's like, no, I don't like you, you don't like me, no. Enemy of my enemy is my friend, even though I don't like anybody, right? It's that kind of thing. And you could read Obadiah with some of that flavor as if Obadiah is just mad and he's whining and he's complaining, and so he's writing this. But I would encourage you not to read Obadiah that way, specifically because of what Obadiah says in verse 15. Because there is more at play in the book of Obadiah than we would probably give it at first glance. Read verse 15 with me. For the day of the Lord is near. Now this is key, okay? This first sentence. For the day of the Lord is near upon Edom? No, upon all nations. That's interesting. As you have done, so it shall be done to you. Your deed shall return on your own head. That's interesting. It's interesting for two reasons. Because this entire book is about Edom and what God is going to do to Edom. But in verse 15, as sort of the hinge verse, Obadiah says, but the day of the Lord is near all nations. So what is he doing? Like, what is he trying to change? Venues? Does he not feel like he's not getting, not harsh enough against Edom? What's going on, right? Well, what Obadiah is doing is he's using Edom, or the Edomites, or their action, as a prototype, or what I think is the correct term in literature, a foil for what's going to happen in the future, right? So what Obadiah is really doing is he's giving you a glance way into the future about what is going to happen if we or they or whoever acts just like the Edomites. Because see, when Obadiah uses this phrase, for the day of the Lord, he is not meaning some random day. But in Jewish culture, whenever, and you can read it, if you read the prophets, you'll see them over and over talk about the day of the Lord. You even see that carry over into the New Testament as well. And when authors and when writers of the New Testament refer to the day of the Lord, it's not a random day. Rather, it is the day in which God is going to, we would say, Jesus is going to come back to earth, seek revenge or vengeance on all the evildoers. He is going to, with righteous justice, justify the righteous and condemn the wicked. So think of the end of the book of Revelation. That may not be in that context, but that is what Obadiah is referring to. The day in which God will physically visit the earth and every wrong will be righted and every righteous person will be justified. But in that context, so he throws us forward, but he throws us forward not just in the context of Edom, but in the context of all nations. So what Obadiah is trying to do is he's taken the rivalry of the past, the present situation, and then he's throwing us forward into the future to say, hey, look, guys, if you act like this, here's where you're going to end up. And it wasn't a good place. Remember, what did Obadiah say about Edom? Burned like stubble. No one will survive. They will be pillaged. They'll be crushed. The Lord will destroy them all. And what Obadiah is trying to tell anyone who reads his letter is, this rivalry of the past, if it is not checked, will eventually lead to the present. And if left unchecked in the present, will produce disastrous results in the future, if at no other time when the Lord comes back. You ever seen that happen in your life? One insignificant decision at the time, seemingly insignificant decision at the time, turned out to be like a mushroom cloud of disaster in your life? You know what I mean? Like, the idea or the picture I get in my mind is the old photos or the old movie reel of when we tested the first atomic bomb, and it's like, and it's like that little ball produced all that, right? Think about it. If the rivalry of Esau and Jacob, from Esau's point of view, would have gone differently, do you think King Balak in Numbers would have said, hey, y'all can't go through Israelite Moses. No, I won't give you safe passage. In fact, I'm going to get a pagan priest to try to curse you 3 times. And if it would have gone different then, do you think that when David and Saul and Solomon and the kings of Israel, that there would have been this fighting back and forth and ebb and flow? And if it would have been different then, do you think when the Babylonians came, Edom would have said, hey, we'll jump on y'all's side? I don't think the answer is no. But because it was unchecked in the past over and over and over and over again, ultimately, all of this disobedience and not following the Lord builds up, and you're left with the end result, which Obadiah says is for anyone who follows this path. So that includes me and you, right? And so we read Obadiah not as a sour grapes, but as a warning of what sin looks like when it is left unchecked in our life, right? And so then we come to ask our question. We're going to kind of shift gears just a little bit, and we're going to ask the question, which is an important question, because I think depending on how you answer this question determines how you apply this book to your life and my life and our life. And here's the question. Who was Obadiah writing these 21 verses to? Who was the main audience who was going to read Obadiah's letter? You really have 2 options. You have the Edomites or you have the Israelites. All right? Now follow me. If you think that the Edomites, now certainly they may have gotten this letter, but if you think the Edomites are the main recipients of this letter, then here's what you as an Israelite would do. Hey man, God's going to get them. Oh boy, y'all just wait for it. I may not see it, but my grandchildren, God's going to get them. He's going to tear them up. Did you hear what he said? Pillage, plunder, death, destruction. They're going to be like that dry field out there this year. God going to burn them up. What does that produce in you? Pride. Right? Pride. Because God's going to get you, not me. Because I didn't do nothing wrong. You did it wrong. And so God's going to get you. All right, that's one side. I don't think that's the right side. I think Obadiah's main audience is the Jewish people themselves. Right? And so one, it is a check against rivalry on one hand. Right? We just talked about that. That you need to check your rivalry, because realistically, if Jacob and Israel and the Israelites would have done their part of the rivalry, then it may not have escalated to this point. But we're here, right? And so Israel can't change the past, so they can only look and do in the current situation that they're living in and plan for the future. So in a book like Obadiah, if it's not about God's going to get them, and it's not about pride, and it's not about arrogance, which clearly God's against, what is the main idea, or what is Obadiah trying to get across from an application way for the Israelites? I think it's 3 things, okay? So if you want like 3 main ideas for this morning, here they are. The first one is rest in your calling. When I read Obadiah, here's what I read. Here's what I read. Israel, you are still God's people. I know that things are bad right now, and I know your cousins over there are attacking you, and I know that people who don't like you, the Babylonians who are strangers, they're attacking you, but listen to me, you are still God's people. And that blessing that I gave to Abraham all the way back in Genesis chapter 12 and chapter 15 of how I would bless you and how I would make you a great nation, I believe Obadiah is trying to get across that is still in place for Israel. They've got to rest in their calling. The second thing I think Obadiah is trying to get across is you need to lean into truth. Lean into truth. Now put yourself, really quickly, put yourself in the situation of the Israelites. Strangers, the Babylonians, had come and attacked you, and now your cousins are joining not your side, but their side. Man, I don't know about you, but my blood pressure immediately starts to go, right? You remember the little cartoon, where one of the old school cartoons where the smoke blows out the ears, right? Like that's the picture we get. And we kind of talked this a little bit about this several weeks ago. But the idea is we have to lean on truth, not emotion in the moment, right? And when I read Obadiah and when we lean into the truth that is in Obadiah, here's what we see. And I think we see 2 points of truth. One, God is sovereign. Like we cannot forget that God knew this was going to happen. This did not catch God off by surprise. Like he wasn't unaware that the Edomites were going to side with the Babylonians. God knew that was going to happen. But here's the other thing that I think is clear throughout the entire book. It is that Israel is to allow God to avenge them, not Israel do it on their own. Right? Nowhere in Obadiah does God say, hey, Israel, I want you to now go out and do X, Y, and Z. No, what does the Bible say? What does Obadiah say? God is going to do X, Y, and Z, not you. Right? I think several weeks ago we talked about sometimes we try to fight our own battles when we don't have to, and when we should just allow God to do His work and not try to do it for Him. I think this is another example clearly of that happening. And thirdly, I think if we're trying to summarize kind of what Obadiah is about, I would say look to the future. Because yes, Obadiah is about an attack on this country, and it's about, all of this bad happening to them, but that is not the end goal. Because in verse 17, here's what we read. But in Mount Zion, in Jerusalem, in Israel, there shall be those who escape, and it shall be holy, and the house of Jacob shall possess their own possessions. In other words, there is hope. There is a future. There is someone coming who will lead all of us out from where we are to where God's called us to be. And ultimately, that takes place in the person and the work of Jesus. And though we long, and though we wait, and though we look forward to His return, it's like Obadiah. Remember, he's talking about the rivalry of the past, the present situation, and he's looking into the future. And that future road goes through the cross and to Jesus' return. And ultimately, I think what Obadiah is leaning for us today is when we look down that road and we look through the cross, what happens there determines what happens at the end, right? If we believe in Him and if we trust in Him, man, there is an escape. There is, as he said, it's holy, it's awesome, you're safe. But if you don't, then what happens to Edom becomes also our fate. And so as we transition now to how does this apply to us, and what does this mean for us today? I don't know where you're at in life situation, and I don't know what's going on in your life. I'll be honest with you, Holly and I have had a pretty rough last week to 8 days, right? Some of y'all may be aware that last weekend we were coming home. We had a great week last week, 2 weeks ago, and we were coming home, and we had grandparents were keeping the kids, and so we were going to go out for anniversary. It was Monday, so we had this trip planned to Atlanta, and all of a sudden this guy stops in front of me, and I'm pulling a big trailer, and I can't stop, and right? 20 years with no accidents down the window in one moment. I was devastated. My truck is sitting in my mom and dad's yard, and the whole front end is looks like a taco. That guy's trailer hitch just made a taco out of my front end of my truck, and it's just but it's a bad taco, right? And then we got up, we got home, and we're just kind of or I am at least, dejected, and just right? So now I don't have a truck, and I don't have a vehicle at all at this point. And so well, man, what are we going to do? So we're looking forward to Sunday, right? Because surely Sunday will be better. And then we wake up at 7:30 and we hear, boom! And we're like, what in the world happened? And we're running around because it sounds like a tree has fell. And we're like, no! Because we don't know where it's fell. And it has landed against the house. And we're like, ah. So we had a great morning with you guys, but then after, the teenagers did such a great job. Right, we had to go home, and we spent the rest of the afternoon cutting the tree down. Thank God nothing happened to the house. And so we're like this is over, right? So Monday, our anniversary, we just kind of did nothing, and we kind of stayed home. We kind of nixed our trip to go to Atlanta and all this kind of stuff. And so we have to go pick up the boys, so we go to Warner Robins to meet Holly's mom and dad. Had a great dinner with them, and we're getting ready to go. And Holly was like, hey, I'm going to the bathroom. And so Tanner heard bathroom. And so he went to the bathroom, although we didn't go to the bathroom. So he went to the bathroom by himself, but we didn't know he had went to the bathroom. You see where this story's going? We lost our child in the restaurant, right? For about 3 minutes. And so Holly goes up to the door and it's like, don't let anybody out. And so they're like, so they posted people around. We're scrambling. Our people are giving you that like weird look like, what are these crazy people doing? Because we're frantically running back and forth. And you know where Tanner's at? In the bathroom. Sitting on the floor playing his tablet. Nothing, not a care in the world. Because he heard, we're going to the bathroom. Right? I don't know if hopefully your week's been a little better than that. Right? But I feel like I know what Israel, my cousins aren't attacking me, thank God, and strangers aren't carrying me off in some sense. But I feel like I know what Obadiah, what Israel is going through, right? I feel like I understand where they're at in this moment, even though our circumstances are different. I understand what is going on in that moment. They feel like something isn't right, and all of this stuff is beginning to pile up on them, right? And so we have to ask ourselves the question, what do we do when we're like the Israelites and we read the book of Obadiah? What hope does it give us, or what inspiration or what message does it bring to us? And I don't think the message is, hey, point the finger at all of those bad people, God's going to get them. Right? I don't think that's the message. But I think what God would have us to hear today is the exact same thing that he would have Israel hear today in Obadiah's time when he originally wrote it. And it would be this: rest in your calling. When life goes crazy and things happen and people attack you and you don't know what's going on, I would encourage you to do what I think Obadiah is calling his people to do, which is rest in your calling. Let me read a few verses for you really quickly. Romans chapter 8, verse 35 through 39 reads this. A little bit long, but it's phenomenal. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness or danger or sword? As it is written, for your sake we are being killed all day long. We are regarded as sheep to be slaughtered. No. In all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. For I am sure that neither life nor death nor angels nor rulers nor things present nor things to come nor powers nor height nor depth nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus our Lord. When life goes crazy and things don't make sense and people are against you and people are attacking you and all of this stuff, you have to rest in your calling, and you got to rest in whose you are. Right? What does Paul say here in Romans? That nothing, no one will separate you from the love of God. No, listen to me, and this would be a tragic state, but it would be a graceful state. If no one else in the world loves you, God does. If everybody is against you, God's not. If nobody else likes you, people post bad things about you on social media, God still is for you, and he still loves you. Amen. So not only must you rest in whose you are, but you must rest in what you are called to do. Read with me Philippians chapter 1, verse 6, and then 4:13. I am sure of this, Paul again, I am sure of this, that he who began a good work in you will bring it to completion at the end, at the day of Jesus Christ. And one of my favorite verses in the All Bible, Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through him who strengthens me. I mentioned Pastor Terry a few minutes ago, and we were talking yesterday, and one of the things he told me when he was getting called into ministry, one of the pastors who was at a church where he was going at the time said, Terry, don't ever resign on Monday. And I was like, ha, 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 that's funny, right? And he said, he laughed and kind of was like, yeah, all right, yeah. And he said, I can't tell you how many times I wanted to resign on Monday. And we laughed about it and all that. And I'll be honest with you, Holly can attest that there have been several days in our ministry over the last 15 years that I wanted an 8-to-5 job. Done with this? Just give me a job that when I leave, I can leave it there. I'll go turn wrenches. I'll pipe fit. I'll go lay irrigation. I'll do something. Just give me a job that when I leave it there, and I don't have to bring it home. Now I realize that's kind of naive because I'm really not sure there's that job in some degree, but at least from my side there was, right? And there were many days that I was like, yeah, thank you, God. All right, you're good. Yay, all right, I'm going to do something else now, right? But you know what's kept me going through this? It is God's calling on my life. Right. Because every time, and Holly can attest to this, every time I've tried to do something different, God keeps pulling me back and pulling me back and pulling me back. And I don't know if that's your life. I don't know if that's where you're at. But I'm telling you, if you haven't faced it yet, you will. Teenagers, if you haven't faced it, you will. There will come a point in your life where all you have to rest on is God's calling in your life. And you got to keep going, and you got to keep going, and you got to keep going. So I believe God's calling us today to rest in your calling, rest in whose you are and what He has called you to do. The second thing I think He's calling us to do, or pushing us to do, is to lean into truth, right? You can't live on emotion. In the moment, emotion will kill you. You have to live on truth. That God is sovereign, that God knows what He's doing. You've got to lean into Jesus. You've got to lean into His Word. That's why we have pushed over and over and over again this word, memorizing Bible verses. And that's why we're going through the book of the Bible, looking at major portions of Scripture, because the Bible is still relevant for our lives today. And it is impactful and meaningful, and it will transform your life. We've got to lean into truth. And then lastly, we've got to look to the future. We have the luxury of knowing the full story where Obadiah only knows part. See, we get to see the end of the story, right? We get to see how Jesus defeats all the bad and sin and injustice on the cross. And we get to see the end where He comes back and Christ returns and what heaven's going to be like. Obadiah didn't have that luxury. And so as we look to the future, we look to it more like what 1 John 3:2, where John says these words. Beloved, we are God's children now, and what we will be has not yet appeared. But we know, or rather we can have confidence, that when He, Jesus, appears, we shall be like Him, because we shall see Him as He is. Man, what an amazing verse. Man, we got to look to the future. So no matter how bad it gets, no matter who's against us, whether it's our cousins or our neighbor across the street, whether it's something's going bad in our life, something's going wrong, or we're in the situation that Israel was in Obadiah, man, we've got to rest in our calling. We've got to lean into truth. And if nothing else, we've got to look to the future. Because I don't know about you guys, but my future is much brighter than even today. Because my future ends with me in heaven worshiping at the throne of God forever and ever and ever. And there will be no more tears. And all pain and suffering will be gone. And all evil will be eradicated. You can read the rest of it in Revelation. It is phenomenal. Right? And so when things get awful, if I can't do anything else, I can always look to the future. So I don't know where you're at today. I don't know what's going on in your life. I don't know what situation you're in. If you're in a situation like Israel is in, maybe you are. Maybe you're coming out of one. Or maybe God's preparing you with this message because you're about to go into that season of life. I don't know. But whenever you get into it, I want you to remember these three things. Rest in your calling, lean into truth, and look to the future. Right? Rest, lean, and look. Rest, lean, and look. All right? Pray with me really quickly. Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for your grace and mercy. Lord, we love you and praise you for who you are and for all that you're doing in our lives. And Lord, we pray that you would help us in those moments of difficulty to rest to lean and to look, to rest in your calling, to lean into truth, and to look to the future.